I also am very frustrated when I cannot figure out the stupid seatbelt. It's dumb! It should be easier. I don't know who's making these seatbelts, but come on, people! Hello, welcome to the Chirp YouTube channel. My name is Christy, and I am your friendly online speech-language pathologist and specialist in children's communication development, which includes behavior, because behavior is one type of communication. Today, I am going to give you another hint about behavior. If you have been watching my most recent series, I'm talking about starting programming for neurodivergent children and the things you might need to know as you go through that process. And this is happening at an excellent time because my new program at my local church has just recently opened, and I am experiencing the newness of new kids in a new environment with new volunteers and families experiencing new things right along with us, and the kids experiencing new things right along with us. And it is stimulating my little neurons to talk about some of the things that I'm seeing. And in this particular program, the thing that is most concerning to me is the behavior of a couple of our little boys. They happen to be siblings in this case, and their behavior is very oppositional. I'm not going to diagnose them, and oppositional defiant disorder is a disorder I have some difficulties with anyway, for reasons I can go into at a later date, but it is very difficult to manage the behavior of children who naturally tend to do the opposite of whatever it is you want them to be doing. And we are working to manage that in our classroom, and we are working to help them develop better coping strategies. One of the ways that we are going to be doing this is by teaching rules very specifically. I talked about that last week. And this week I would like to talk about another thing that we are doing to help these little boys. That is, we are going to help them by modeling their feelings for them. This seems maybe a little crazy, and also it might seem like maybe this is not going to help. However, it does help. And there is a lot of research. Okay, there's not a lot of research. There are a few research studies that have been done recently about oppositional behavior in children. And it appears that these children are more easily alerted. Their bodies naturally respond too much to the fear stimulus. And what do you automatically do if you are afraid and someone asks you to do something? You say no, and you set a very firm boundary. Anger is the emotion that we have as humans when we are trying to strengthen our boundaries. When we know that I need to be strong, this might be subconscious, then I'm going to set a firm boundary, and that might mean that I have to be angry in order to set a firm boundary. If I'm not angry enough about someone pushing my boundaries or stepping over my limits that I have set, then I'm not going to be able to enforce my boundary. This is why we have anger. It is meant to help us reinforce our boundaries. And these kids appear, more studies need to be done, they appear to naturally respond with fear and respond with very firm setting of boundaries. And we cannot overcome this tendency by causing more fear, by being very firm with them, by being aggressive or violent to them, by threatening them. These things do not work for changing this behavior. what works is patient kindness and compassion. A lot of these kids have higher IQs and also some other delays, maybe in the areas of communication, maybe in the areas of social skills, maybe in the areas of motor skills. One of these little boys I'm thinking of has a pretty serious articulation problem. He's very difficult to understand. The other little boy has some motor delays. He actually had a bathroom accident, even though he is not a young child anymore this last week. These things combined together really lead to a difficult time for children. So my plan is to help them recognize what they are feeling, to help verbalize those feelings, and then to come together, hopefully, to a better solution than just saying no and hiding under the table. Even though hiding under the table is perfectly fine in Miss Christie's classroom, I do want children to be able to participate. I do want children to be kind to each other and get to know their peers. And I want to be able to encourage them along the way that I see their growth. I see the beautiful person inside. One thing that happened this last week, by the way, I should tell you, these two little boys are brothers and they do not relate well to each other. And right now I only have one classroom open, so I cannot split them up. So we're working on that and we're trying to keep them both safe and kind to each other because they really do rile each other up. One way that I did that this last week is they were sitting next to each other playing with a train set, and the big one, who has a lot more behavior difficulties, okay, maybe not more, they're just, I don't even know how to describe it. They both have challenges. The big one seems to be a little more likely to pick fights on purpose for some reason. So he grabs something that the other child had been playing with, a little train car, and drives it away. And of course the little one chases after him and starts hitting him in his ineffective but aggressive way. And so I was doing something else with a different student at the time, but I ran over, I sat down on the floor, and I said, "Jack, what's going on?" And he was screaming, "Ah!" and hitting. And so I sat between them. So then he's hitting me, but he's, like I said, ineffective at violence, even though he would like to be effective. Let's hope we can stamp out this behavior before he becomes old enough where it actually hurts. He told me, "Ah, Jimmy took my train car." So I said, "Okay, let's talk about that." I could say, "Jimmy, give me that." Two things to mention here. You'll notice I am speaking as if I am the child. I'm not saying, "You should say, Jimmy, give me that." I want to phrase this so that if the child were a parrot, the child could speak the appropriate way. This is called as if speaking. When he takes my toy, I can say, "Jimmy, give me that back." This is speaking as if I am the child. The second thing I want you to notice about this is that I'm not trying to give him adult phrases to say to another adult who took my train, because this child is, I think he's 4, and he is not going to use phrases such as, "Excuse me, I was playing with that first." He's going to say, "Give me that." And that is developmentally appropriate for him to say. And that is what I want to model. So those are two important things when we are trying to help kids express their emotions. A lot of times, behavior challenges come from children having a really big emotion and not knowing how to express it. I still have to get to the bottom of why the older brother, Jimmy, in this scenario, these are fake names, why he decides to stir stuff up. I don't know if he feels like his brother is getting too much attention. I don't know if he wants to interact with someone and just doesn't know how to get our attention. I don't know if he feels bad and he wants his brother to be seen as bad also, because he's hitting and he knows what his brother's response will be, and he knows that we won't like that as adults, and so we'll see brother as bad also. I don't know these answers yet, but I'm assessing every time I get to hang out with these boys. I'm learning from them, and I'm trying to help them express the feelings that they are having so that we can come up with some better solutions together. Another example of this is not from my classroom, but from a trip that we took recently to visit dear friends that we have who live in a neighboring state. They have 2 daughters, one of whom has some pretty significant behavior challenges and frequent meltdowns that can turn aggressive. I was sitting in the middle seat in their van, and the 2 girls were sitting in the very back. But you know how it is. When you're in the back seat of a van, there's no way you can figure out the seat belt without a good deal of practice. The dad was eager to get on the road. We were going somewhere exciting. The girl was having trouble. I'm going to call her Anna. She was having a lot of trouble with the seat belt. This is another case where this child has pretty good IQ, but some developmental delays at the same time. We call this in the education field twice exceptional. Exceptional in one direction, which is more advanced than other children, and exceptional in the other direction because you are less advanced than another child would be in that area at your age. You are exceptional in 2 different directions, and that makes it very difficult for a child because if you have an IQ, you know what you're supposed to be doing. But at the same time, you're not sure how to get there with the current equipment that you have. And this is very challenging for children to manage. I would consider myself a twice exceptional student because I had a very high IQ. Sorry to brag. It's measured. It's true. So I guess it's not bragging. But I had a very difficult time managing myself emotionally. My social skills were fine. My communication skills were above average. Everything else was above average, but I did not know how to manage my emotions very well. So I cried all the time through much of my early elementary years. Eventually, I started learning how to handle that, but I wish there had been a wise adult in my life at this time who could have talked me through my big feelings because you're little. You don't have the skills to solve these problems by yourself. And it is the adult's job to help children solve the problems that they're having because children are not equipped to solve them alone. In this case, the family was getting kind of freaked out because this little girl, Anna's voice was rising. She was getting really frustrated. She was starting to, get frustrated, you can tell, because children grind their jaws, grind their teeth, they ball up their fists, they get stiff, they start talking really high pitch. They might start screaming, they might go, woo, they might start crying. And a lot of times families freak out, especially if they've experienced aggression from children before or huge meltdowns. All they want to do is stop the meltdown. So either they'll totally solve the problem for the child or they'll try to talk the child out of their feelings. Neither of these things are going to work because the child cannot be talked out of a reasonable feeling. This is a reasonable feeling. I also am very frustrated when I cannot figure out the stupid seatbelt. It's dumb. It should be easier. I don't know who's making these seatbelts, but come on, people. Also, you can't just convince a child that they're being ridiculous because they're not. But if you completely solve the problem for the child, then it's just going to happen again next time because they haven't learned how to do the seatbelt or how to communicate about their feelings. So Anna was ramping up. The family was saying, calm down, it's fine, just you'll get it. And she was saying, you're not listening to me. And that is very common amongst kids who are having difficulty managing their emotions. They feel like adults are not listening because adults are not taking their feelings seriously. I remember feeling like this as a child. I remember feeling like the grown-ups around me were patronizing me or just trying to get me to shut up. They weren't trying to help me, and they weren't paying attention to how upsetting this was for me. Be an adult who understands that these things are upsetting for children. Children do not like being out of control. They don't like feeling like they have to hit other children in order to get what is rightfully theirs, even if it's maybe not rightfully theirs. In this case, I was able, because I was sitting right in front of her, I was able to turn around, look her right in her face, and say, "Anna, tell me what's going on." And this almost immediately started things on the downward as far as her tension level. Someone was listening. I said, "Anna, I'm listening to you. Tell me what's happening. What is frustrating you? We can fix it together. We can figure this out." And we did. She said, "The seatbelt won't go in, and my sister is poking me and rushing me, and Dad's ready to drive away without my seatbelt on, and that's not safe." There were lots of really good things, reasonable things that were upsetting her. And so I was able to say, okay, I told Dad, "Dad, please don't drive away yet. We don't want to be dangerous, and Anna has not figured the seatbelt out quite yet, but we're going to get there." And then I said, "Okay, what seems to be the problem?" And we problem solved through this occasion together. It turns out she figured it out by herself. She needed to scoot over her booster seat because her booster seat was covering the plug where the seatbelt was supposed to go in. And so she scooted it over temporarily, plugged in the seatbelt, and then scooted it back, and it was fine. She figured it out all by herself, but she couldn't do that until she was calm enough, until she felt listened to, until she felt safe enough to problem solve. I don't know if you've thought about this, but when you're in fear mode, whether or not it's reasonable fear, when you're in fear mode, what happens is you want to run and fight. You've heard the reflexes that we have are fight, flight, fawn, or freeze. And most of our kids with this particular brain style, they want to fight when they're afraid. And they're afraid, their body is afraid most of the time. Our job is to turn down the fear response as much as we can, even though that's challenging. Once the fear is turned down, then the cortex kicks in and we can start thinking, problem solving. We can cogitate. We can use our little gray cells. This is how we want to help children through their big feelings that they are having. And these are some things we are going to be doing in my classroom, especially with these two little boys who have a lot of big feelings and who are maybe not managing them the way that I wish they would. I should say, both of these boys, when they were in the typical programming that we have, had meltdowns, were aggressive. The older one was in our main classroom, and he was hitting, he was biting, he was swearing. He tried to run out the door, ran and hid in a corner and was hissing. And we have had nothing near that severe since we have had them in our classroom. The classroom is calmer. There is a lot more adult support, still not as much as I would like because volunteers are always hard to come by. But I have seen improvement. And I know that by continuing to invest in our students with love, with patience, with kindness, continuing to help them understand and manage their own feelings, it's going to continue to get better. And your child or your students can also continue to get better. Even though it's always a very slow process, there's never a magic answer. Actually, not never. There are a couple cases I know of where there were things in the brain that were wrong that led to very aggressive behavior. One was a brain tumor, one of my students, and then one I read about was actually a strep infection that had inflamed this child's brain, and she became all of a sudden out of control violent. So do get your child checked out by a doctor if you're concerned about a sudden change in behavior. But if this has been a pattern and you know it's going to be a while until we get it straightened out, I do have a couple of books I would like to recommend. Just one, I think, today. You know I love books. I love them. And the first one I'm going to recommend is called The Explosive Child. It's the best book on this topic of oppositional behavior, and I will put a link to it in the box down below. In fact, I think there's always a link to this book in the box below my videos because I love it so much. It's fantastic. Thank you for being here. Thank you for wanting to get better at the interactions that you have with children. I will see you in the next video. Bye.